Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 114 with Ken Ruggiero, talking all about college student financing innovations, how students are able to get the financing they need to pursue their higher education goals. So really complicated, nuanced topic, but I'm really glad we got some time and space to talk about it here. Ken gives a lot of context and clearly has a lot of knowledge and passion for this space. So I'm very grateful for his time and all that he shared, and some great resources to check out in the show notes. And another quick plug before we get into the episode, please do go check out the merch store. There's a link in the description of this episode and a quick link on the website as well to get yourself directed over there. But there's a great sale going on, so get some cool merch, support the show. It is greatly appreciated. But without further ado, this is episode number 114 with Ken Ruggiero. Super excited to have this opportunity to talk through a topic that we really haven't spent too much time on for the podcast here, around students funding their journeys in higher education. Certainly continues to be a hot topic. So glad we're giving it some space and time here. But Ken, we'll start out as we always do. If you just want to introduce yourself to everybody and give a brief overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Great, thanks, Dustin, and thanks for having me in this topic, because it's important and it's in the news often. This is Ken Ruggiero. I am CEO and co-founder of Ascent Funding, and I've been involved in higher education for the last 17 years. Prior to that, I was in consulting and technology companies, mostly as their CFO in New York, and then here in San Diego, where Ascent is headquartered. And I've been trying to solve the problem of matching the investment in an education with the outcome of an education for a very long time. And Ascent is really the closest we've gotten so far. And I am 100% convinced we will get all the way there through the journey that we're on. Yeah.
And I guess, that segues nicely, I guess it's been, a long career leading to this moment. Like you said, you've been kind of dedicated to this. So just to make sure everybody kind of fully understands the context that you're working in now, if you just want to explain a little bit about what Ascent does so that everybody just has that context.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as a finance professional and having been involved in student loan companies that originated over $10 billion of student loans, I not only have been studying the problem and working on solutions, but I've been quite the practitioner. I've also been what I would call a mild user. I grew up as one of three sons who were all first-time learners, and we all three of us paid our way through college. And we were all sons of parents who didn't go to college. So so I worked summers and winters. I did work study, and I had a great experience at UMass and graduated with a bachelor's in accounting, and have a lot to be thankful for. And had very low student loan debt when I graduated because of the cost of education. And fast forward to where I am now in life, and I've got two sons. And we live here in California, and if they wanted to, quote, pay their way through school, or save and pay is kind of the way it has to go, then they couldn't do that here in California without materially impacting their everything they wanted to do as young people going through high school. So it's not an option anymore. And we talk about student debt and what the problems of student debt are. And it's not going away. Like the idea that college will cost less is that they'll, quote, bend the cost curve. There will always be cheaper solutions. There will always be substitute solutions. But for more than 80% of the college going students over the next probably 5 to 10 years, that the price is not going to change to get a bachelor's degree. So we looked at this problem. I've looked at this problem and said, well, what if you can't change the cost? Can you at least change the choice of what people choose to do? And in changing the choice, can we signal to the market a good choice versus a bad choice? And in order to get to any of those answers, you needed to understand what the outcomes of an education are. So Ascent was built really as a thought experiment. Could we make student loans to students and families that banks wouldn't or couldn't do? and could we get those financed by the financiers of Wall Street, which is really the litmus test for do you have a scalable and viable loan. Mm-hmm. And starting back in 2015, we because of the services business we had built through the gold businesses, we had access to over $20 billion of data that were student loans originated from 2001 to 2007. And we studied that data, and we studied the outcomes of those students that took loans, lived through a grisly Great Recession, and came out the other side with or without a degree and with student loan debt. And we studied their outcomes, and we studied what their income levels would and could be. And what we concluded was we could actually make student loans based off of the outcome, not the current circumstance. And as you might know, student loans, when they're done by banks like Sallie Mae or others, they're based off the current circumstance. And they define the current circumstance just by two questions. Do you have a FICO score over 680? And do you have income over a certain threshold, maybe $24,000? And if you fail either of those, then the bank is done talking to that student, and they only want to talk to the parent or guardian or person with those two variables that say yes. And we said, wow, that's giving hardworking students, much like I was when I was a teenager, that's giving them zero credit for what they've done life to date, and it's giving them zero credit for where they'll end up. So can we make a loan that is based off the predicted outcome and success of the student versus the current circumstance? The answer was yes. So the Ascent Future Income Loan is really our signature product. It's available at over 1,700 schools, and it solves the problem that would address people like me and millions of other first-time learners and millions of other adult learners who've gotten maybe one bachelor's degree and want to get a second because they're having a career change, and there's no more federal money available, and it'll affect. And we think it'll enable a lot of. We lend to DACA students, international students, students who have English as a second language. We're focused on the underserved and overlooked, and it's been quite the mission. But it's been, I'll say, where I am in my career, it's been incredibly professionally fulfilling to see the outcomes we've been able to help achieve and the team of people we've been able to bring to solve this problem.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. I mean, it's definitely, like you said, it's just a big problem. It's always grabbing headlines, but I just don't think sometimes you're really hearing people that are earnestly trying to do something about it. It's just sometimes there's a lot of maybe hand wringing or just complaining or whatever. But, and it's certainly, an issue and just like a topic that, didn't just pop up out of nowhere. So I guess from your point of view, we can kind of like just focus here for a little bit of the variable or variables and whether you want to kind of take this macro or micro or just any of those things of like what led to this, to like Ascent being necessary, like to this current situation. And like, it certainly is on maybe like the institution side, college and universities and just, federal funding or just, these financial systems and those sort of things. So whatever angle, Eddie, or all of those things, I imagine they're all kind of players here. But like, what do you kind of see as the variables that led us to this point?
Yeah, I think, the thing that frustrates me and we make student loans, we make income share agreements available to students. We're a credit provider. So the thing that I'm most frustrated by and hand wringing doesn't do its service, but it's close. But the thing I'm frustrated by is everyone's talking about the symptom. They think the loan is the actual disease, and it's just the symptom. And sorry for a medical metaphor during these times. That's probably a bad choice of examples, but that's probably as powerful one as I can make right now. And in this questionable metaphor, I would say that the disease is really the cost of an education, and then the quality of the education. And I'm not saying that there's not a lot of really great professors and great programs, but quality has always been disconnected between the transfer of knowledge and the achievement of an outcome defined as a job or the opportunity to achieve more knowledge. So we talk about saying, hey, there's a problem with student loans, and no one. It's the third rail of talking about student loans. The politicians don't want to say that paying $250,000 to go to a 4-year institution is too high. They don't want to say that the universities are allocating too much money to administration and not teaching. But the research is out. The universities have shifted dollars from actually teaching students to marketing and administrative overhead and lazy rivers and competing with neighboring colleges for the same students. So we've got this rising cost that because of the cost of labor, because of the cost of the fixed infrastructure of a university, you can't pay tenured professors less, and you can't let buildings crumble or your plant not get maintained. Otherwise, you'll have unsafe conditions for the students on campus. Mm-hmm. So we've got a rising cost. And people point to how do you pay for the rising costs by saying, well, there should be more government funding. We might talk a little bit about President-elect Biden's desire to have free tuition at state institutions, but that's not going to solve the problem. And so the two problems, as I said, one, we're talking about loans and not cost, because the lender makes a finite amount of profit. But once that loan goes to the school makes a much greater profit, or at least defrays a much greater problem when you send a $15,000 loan to a school and you're making 6% interest rate on it. So one, that, and then two, my frustration, and I've had one son get a bachelor's degree, in 4 years. I've got my second son who's a senior now. He's a nursing major at University of San Francisco, and I've been buying higher ed for the last 6 or I guess 7 years now, and at the two institutions they went to, there's not help getting into the workforce, and there's no real understanding about what your starting salary is going to be, and that's incredibly frustrating. I think about any other consumer product that you might buy. And if you walked into Best Buy and said, I want to borrow money to buy that television, can you tell me how much it costs? And the answer is, well, once you get it home, we'll send you the bill. And you wouldn't buy that television, right? But that's the way higher ed works. You go into a process where, at least here in California, depending on what major you pick at what university, there's something called impacted majors, and they will tell you, if you look for it, that if you're, for instance, a psychology major, and I won't name schools, they will tell you it will take you 5 years to graduate because you can't get your upper level classes. And it's not like if you're smart enough and hardworking enough, you can get they're telling you when you're a freshman, you will not be able to graduate in 4 years. Now, the college cost here in California at the UC system runs up to $34,000 a year for in-school, for in-state residents. So if you're planning to buy a bachelor's degree from one of those institutions, you should know that it's going to cost you an extra $34,000, but you don't. And you should know that if you graduate with a psychology degree, your average starting salary will likely be somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range, because that's what the data say. So I'm frustrated that this is not getting exposed. And if you look at the Bright Futures engine, that is our beta version of trying to expose some of these costs and some of these outcomes and some of these critical choices that families and students need to make, that tied to our loan, which is another signaling device, are our best shots we've got so far. And we're making 10 and 15-year loans, which means we have to live with these answers for 10 or 15 years. So we're excited about being part of the solution that exposes just good decision making as you buy higher education.
Well, I guess ironically enough, I guess my brain always thinks of metaphors too, but because I guess all of what you're saying, is certainly the state of the higher ed landscape that I'm kind of hearing a lot about as well. It's certainly just, that lack of transparency, but it makes me think of medical care, the idea that you go in, you get a checkup and they're just oh, we'll just send you the bill, or you just kind of see it after the fact, or just really unclear. And it's the same kind of idea of having, insurance or whatever, try to, pay for it and just kind of being well, no, don't worry about it. Whatever the cost is, we'll pay it. It's I don't know. It's a very complex issue. And it is the idea that it doesn't seem as though there's been a lot of dedicated effort or focus into really getting to the heart of it, and maybe just kind of treating, certain symptoms. And I think it's interesting too. I mean, yeah, because I think a lot of what you're getting at too is depending on where you go and what you study and how long it takes you and all those sort of things, the credential and the kind of product that you have at the end and the loans that you have, because I know that's what some people I've talked to have kind of highlighted is like, well, like the amount of loans isn't necessarily the issue. Like it can't just be if someone, what are their earnings after they graduate? Did they actually even finish, but they still have loans and they have no credential to show for it and those sort of things. So that's like definitely a lot embedded in it into like where just like, well, student loans, yeah, are just like the enemy and vilified and all that. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, obviously in a perfect world, people would have to have no debt to do anything and, all that. But, it really is like a really powerful investment into someone's future to be able to do that. And a lot of, I know what I've talked with people about too, is just making sure that students are making informed choices, like that could just be where like, yeah, somebody is like, oh, it's going to take you 5 years. It's going to be this much money and all that. And they're like, great. Yeah, I accept that. And that is okay with me versus like, yeah, only like figuring out, too late that that was the case. So yeah, I don't know. I guess any thoughts on that of maybe that comparison or just sort of some of those details?
Yeah. I guess one of let's just talk about debt in general, whether it's used to buy higher education or not. If you go, let's just go way back in time, and I won't go too far back or spend too much time. But if you go way back in time, debt used to be really bad. There's something called debtor's prison, right? If you had to borrow money, there was no regulation. It was as ugly as it was a social disgrace. It was high interest rate. It was unregulated. And if you look at some of the capitalistic systems we have in place here in the United States and compare them to the rest of the world, one of the things that keeps the United States as the number one economy on Earth for the period of time that it's been the number one is the access to credit. And once the systems and laws all were put in place to safely allow borrowing, there is no stigma attached with having a credit card, none with having an auto loan, none with having a mortgage on a house. These are not normal for developing worlds. They don't have the access to credit, and they don't have the systems in place to enforce those credits. It's all evolving. So that's like compartmentalize that little story, and then let's go to the 1960s. In the 1960s, in 1965, they authorized the Higher Education Act, and part of that act's mission was to provide access to higher education. Up until 1965, it was a very homogenous set of people who were going through very elite type institutions here in the U.S., and there were a lot of people, especially military, who needed to upskill and reskill themselves. So we had this promotion of access, and you can say what you want about what the Department of Education has and hasn't done over the last 50 years, but I would say up until circa 2008, the Department of Education had done what I would consider as a phenomenal job promoting access, providing low cost in partnership with states access to education, whether it was a community college to get an associate's degree, or whether it was a four-year institution to get a bachelor's degree, or whether it was a graduate school to become a doctor or a lawyer. So this was they had the flywheel spinning, and then we hit the Great Recession, and we started talking about the debt. So fast forward to conversations that some of our first time learners are experiencing with their families whose parents weren't born here in the U.S. And there's now an aversion to debt, which means there's an aversion to paying for and investing in higher education. So we are seeing, I'll say, 50 years of access to education that had a flywheel spinning that said it's okay to take debt from the federal government and maybe the private sector in order to advance your economic and social standing here in the U.S. We now have people saying, don't take debt, it's bad. So again, people don't always, we're on the ground. We're practitioners talking to students and families, and they're making these hard decisions. And the federal government and think tanks and politicians are saying debt is bad. It's okay to buy a car. It's okay to buy a house. It's okay to buy a TV, but it's not okay to buy education. And I would argue that the highest return out of everything I just mentioned is actually that investment in the education. And that's of my many frustrations. I think we've set ourselves, the federal government has set itself, the desire for first-time learners to get through an education has all been set back the better part of a decade. And quite honestly, I don't know when we're going to recover from this, because we're still talking about the wrong thing. We're talking about the debt and not the outcome, and not the quality of the education that's being delivered for that cost.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, it's kind of fair critique of it, because I think the access certainly is still there. Federal student loans and different things are open to many people to get in to the college of their choice if they qualify and everything. But making sure what they're getting while they're there is quality, that they're supported, and that they as they move on from once they get their credential and graduate and get into the workforce, making sure that that's a smooth transition and all of that. So I think, because I know too, like what you said, because I think it's definitely a contentious topic, as well as sort of the quote unquote administrative bloat, which some people, that's kind of a red flag of just oh, well, I am in administration, and it's well, no, all of those roles, I think, from my point of view, are valuable, but there's so many ways right now in terms of different tech tools, or just the way that these kind of bureaucracies of higher education are organized, where it's you've got to keep lean, keep efficient, and use great tools to be able to reach students and help them in effective ways, where I think some of them are just they're going about things very inefficiently, and they could be still supporting students to make sure that they have a quality experience, and making sure that they're investing properly into instruction, and I don't know, just balancing all those priorities, because certainly they're all important. But it's just one of those things. I think I feel this often, where it's kind of people just throw their hands up in the air, where it's just I don't know, it's too hard. We can't figure it out. It's just no. I mean, you just get some thoughtful people together and just commit to there's a lot of institutions that are doing this. Of I think they're kind of balancing all those priorities pretty well. But I mean, I think that's really well, you kind of you followed that thread, and I can really appreciate that, of debt, and how that's almost going to come full circle back to, kind of reticence about that, and all that. But done properly, it can be a really, really powerful investment. And I would say that I'm, certainly a byproduct of that as well, where I can't imagine my life without, education being a part of it, and having debt, but it being, manageable for, my career choices and lifestyle, whatever. But I don't know. I guess we can kind of move, from here to just a more positive aspect of all of this, obviously. So, you just explain how you are working in this space to try to, address these issues and concerns and everything. So if there's just examples that you can say of the outcomes that you have seen, for students through your work of, that you're trying to, just make this whole process just, better for everybody. So I guess, at least for students specifically, what are some of the outcomes that you have seen?
Yeah, and great points, Dustin. I think you're dialed in, and I do applaud you at getting someone who makes student loans on your program. I appreciate that. It tends to be a third rail, and I, as you can tell, I have my thoughts. But the outcomes is why I get out of bed in the morning, and I'll give you just a couple of examples. I can give you a lot, but in the four-year school space, we have what we call our future income loan, which is that outcomes-based loan I described a little bit earlier. And the Ascent funding, the Ascent name is not a household name. There's some other household names like Discover and Sally Mae, and before Wells Fargo left the industry, at Wells Fargo and the Stagecoach. So we're Ascent is not a household name. So we very often see students after they've been rejected by other banks. And the outcomes I love is our loan is designed to pick up the student usually where they run, a student and family usually where they run out of money, which is in their junior and senior or fifth year senior year. And so we have to pull credit because we want to make sure the person hasn't filed bankruptcy or defaulted on a bunch of student loans already, because we're just not going to give that person a loan. But if they don't have a credit score and they don't have a job and they don't have any income over a certain threshold, then they qualify for our future income loan. And what makes me really happy is when my operations group says, we just funded another student who was rejected by 3 lenders. And that's solving a problem. Like you sometimes, I've run lots of businesses, and you try and measure your value. Are we making a difference? Are we charging the right number? But when the rest of our competitors are saying no and we say yes, and then after we say yes, we get to watch the result of that, and the result is that student graduating, then yeah, we're not doing that by the millions, we're doing it by the thousands, but I call that making a difference and really improving someone's situation in life. We're one of the largest lenders in the coding bootcamp space, and I've loved that space for a number of years, since it started about 5-6 years ago in some level of scale, and the outcomes there are phenomenal. About 80% of all of our borrowers already have a bachelor's degree, so it's not the 18-year-old who's holed up in their parents' house and wants to be a coder. Though those folks show up. Those young adults show up, but it's people in their late 20s who want to reskill or upskill themselves, and those are some of the best stories. We make loans to people going to part-time programs and full-time programs. We make them going to online and offline now, obviously. A lot of online learning, and these schools, we have about 75 of them we work with, in some cases exclusively. Their outcomes are phenomenal. The average starting salary before they start the program is right around $45,000 a year. And when they graduate, it takes them about 3 months to get a job, and that job averages about $75,000. So think about that. We're helping. These average loan size are about $10,000. So for a $10,000 loan or a $15,000 program, in 3 to 6 months, we're helping adult learners go from increase their salary from below the average income of the country to above the average income of the country. So that's something we like to promote, right? That is an outcome that the debt is absolutely worth it, and the debt actually can be repaid in less than a year, given the increase in the salaries of the students. So that's why we create customized products. We recently launched something we call an outcomes loan. And the outcomes loan functions very similar to another product in the market called an income share agreement. But the outcomes loan doesn't really become a loan until the student graduates from the program and gets a job. And we do this in tight partnership with the schools. So the schools got a little bit of skin in the game, as the phrase goes. We obviously have our capital in the game, and the students got an accountability to actually do the work and be diligent about completing their education, and hyper diligent about following the school's recommendations on how to prepare for interviews, job search, and then land a job.
Yeah, really great stuff. And I mean, just really great to hear, those outcomes. And I think, yeah, I've been very intrigued about income share agreements. Like, I don't know if that's maybe necessarily like the solution in all, kind of situations, but I think it can be just a really compelling way just to help support students, to be able to get through higher education. I think, we see it a lot, obviously, in the kind of what you're getting at too, with like the boot camp space and stuff. And I almost want to spend like a little bit more time on that, like just really quickly, because I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, with, boot camps and these different kind of like alternative models for credentialing and, different respects, a lot of them, like, it's kind of been lagging for students to be able to get like federal aid or Pell Grants or any of those sort of things. Like, those things just aren't available if it's not like a formal like 4-year, bachelor's degree or something, right? Are you kind of filling a gap there, I guess, with some of these other like alternatives?
Yeah, and that's I made a few comments before about the administrative overhead of colleges and universities, and it's not all their fault. The idea that they have to define what a credit hour is, and then they have to have tenured professors. They have to have a creditor-approved curriculum. They can't add a major without subtracting a major. All of that, quote, overhead is necessary to participate in the federal loan and grant programs, and many state programs, obviously. So the coding bootcamp sector has looked at what I just said and said, well, and other more innovative schools. I like looking at Western Governor University's model, where it's not about the number of minutes or hours you spent learning. It's about your efficiency to master the material, and then it's your competency to prove you know the material. And when I have a conversation about credentialing or credential stacking or competency-based learning, it sounds so obvious. Like if someone just landed here on Earth and you said, hey, a person who's doing bookkeeping for the last 10 years and wants to get an accounting degree has to go all the way back to square one and take accounting 101, even though they could pass the final exam in about 30 minutes, but they'll never get a bachelor's in accounting unless they take accounting 101. You'd be like, why would they waste that amount of money and that amount of time to prove they already know the material? It seems like, it's a waste of time, but that's the way the system works. So the coding boot camps have looked at that dynamic and said, well, it's more about proving to the labor market that we've got someone with the skill set that can do the job they need at the price they want to pay than it is about saying they've got some kind of a degree. And I'll say sadly, because those schools don't avail themselves to the Pell Grant programs or the federal loan programs. But I will say the benefit is they don't, because with free money comes a lot of regulation, a lot of oversight, a lot of business model management, and I think they've been able to move very quickly and very efficiently. They are some of the fastest moving and adapting schools in the pandemic I've ever seen. I mean, we have schools that were 100% in a classroom, and it took them a month, right? But in a month, they had taken all of their curriculum and gotten it online, and didn't, they missed a cohort, but they didn't miss two, and we didn't see higher ed system respond that quickly, and all those schools kept taking money and not changing the cost of tuition, but moving it, in some cases efficiently online, but in most cases not very efficiently online.
And I mean, I just wanted to kind of highlight that because it's just the idea of like that they are, I think, just becoming, just increasingly compelling for students to, like you said, I mean, like career change and to really uplift their earning potential and all that. I mean, it addressed needs of the labor market of things like, coding or like business analytics or just like, user interface design and all these things that are like just really necessary increasingly for pretty much any business needs, some people doing that work. And it is, a little bit of like a specialized skill set. And so it's satisfying all those things. And just, I'm seeing so much like just being kind of immersed in the digital education space, like it just being like really compelling for institutions as well, that like, they want to like, kind of, be almost like the backer of like kind of giving their brand credibility to some of these boot camps. Cause some are just their own little islands of digital education, not associated with any institutions, but I'm seeing a lot that are, there's companies that sort of cater to that, and some digital boot camp companies that are like making kind of big splashy partnerships and creating pipelines for those students as well if they are looking for that. But I mean, just helping to address that gap, like you're saying, like there's just such powerful outcomes for that. And so good on you for seeing that opportunity and being a part of helping that facet of higher education to kind of flourish. But
yeah, I don't think I answered your income share agreement questions. Real quick on that.
Sure.
Not only do these schools innovate around the type of education and the type of job placement and commitment but they've innovated. They found the product in the income share agreement that helps them live their brand promise. And there's income share agreements. We think in the right hands and in the right situation are a great tool, but they're one of many. They're not one of one. And for students to pick from. And we have seen some schools say the only way to buy our education is to give us a percentage of your income into the future. And I've told those schools, I don't think you can tell consumers how to pay for stuff. Mm-hmm. They sometimes don't like when I say that, but it's true. We've seen students who pick a school based off of the financing programs, and there's nothing wrong with that. So to have only one financing choice seems to me to be, but to have multiple financing choices, which is the way we've built our technology, where if you want to, when we're working with certain schools, if you want the loan and the ISA exposed to your student, we can do both. And we're the only finance provider in the country that's got the origination systems to give the schools and in some cases the students that option.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, options are good because yeah, I mean, again, that's just the idea of like, a student, prospective student for any institution, like they have that full transparency of like, okay, I want to major in this, and this is what that means in terms of like the time of study and the cost of it, and then yeah, like options in terms of how they feel comfortable funding that and those sort of things. So yeah, all great stuff. But I guess we'll move on. I'm kind of curious to this because I feel like we've hit on a lot of things that I wanted to cover, but I'm curious if there's any resources to share, whether they're your own or things that you're kind of seeing out there that are kind of grabbing your attention. Any podcasts or articles or books or anything like that you want to recommend that we can include in the show notes.
Yeah, yeah. I probably won't tell you anything you don't know. Scott Galloway, if you don't get his Friday missives on an email or you don't listen to his podcasts, I chuckle each time because I can only imagine the folks at NYU who are paying him to teach students, and then he's railing on the cost that they're charging his students to learn in the master's programs. I think that the irony is palpable, and I don't know how you stop him, but he is a provocateur by design. And I think I love when people have an opinion and then they back it up with data, and he tends to do that with most everything he talks about. So I think I read him weekly. I listen to him occasionally. There's from a research side, we do a lot of reading, and I tell all of our employees and anyone who listened to me, like read every side of a discussion or a debate, so that you get a 360-degree view of what you're trying to solve, not just a 180-degree view. And so one of the research shops out there, the Institute for College Access and Success, it's TICAS. They do great research on access to education and outcomes. And they provide a lot of recommendations into the federal government about how to make things better. One of the things that they were promoting was years ago, which actually got into the federal system, was you should be looking at repayment rates of federal student loans, not default rates. Because default is binary, but repayment is, I'd say it's a time series. And now we've got much more insight into schools and how students are handling their debt post separation. And then on the research front, Strata is a nonprofit that does a lot of surveying. They usually in partnership with Gallup, but they spend a lot of time focused on the adult learner market, like we do, and the research they produce and the podcasts they have, I find very insightful. And so those are some of the things that we focus on, and we're I guess from a financial wellness perspective, as we call it here at Ascent, we're very focused on getting tools into the hands of the students to make sure that they understand a lot of what we just talked about today. Are like what is debt, how does it work, what is accrued interest, what is the difference between a federal loan and a private loan from Ascent. And we've built that into our application process. So we give students a test, before they complete their application to get a loan from us. We give them a test, and we score their financial wellness. And if they get a good grade, they get to keep going through our app. If they get a bad grade, they have to take about a 15-minute lesson on some of the topics I just rattled off, and then we test them again. So I think we're the only lender in the country that will not give a loan to a student or a family if they don't complete what I just said. And I'll say almost everyone completes it. There's a few people who get annoyed with us, and to them I was like, I'm sorry, it was only 15 minutes of your life to do a little bit of brushing up on what debt is, but I think it's the right way to lend, especially to the population that we're touching right now.
Yeah, that's great. And great stuff to check out. I did definitely get turned on to Scott Galloway and his unique style recently, and have been checking out some of his stuff. So I'll emphasize that one a little bit more here. But yeah, I mean, as we wind down and we wrap up with this kind of final thoughts question, we've talked a lot about just kind of the conversation around this and like the solutions that you're offering. But yeah, just kind of final thoughts on this topic that you want to end the episode with.
Yeah, I'll break it into two. One that's specific to Ascent is, or at least the students we talk to. One, we tell everybody, find as much free money as you can. We offer a scholarship on a regular basis. I think last year we gave away $70,000 of scholarships to students. So we tell everybody get the free money that you can from all of the available sources. Fill out the FAFSA, get your Pell Grant, get your low interest rate loan from the federal government, and then save your money. And if the loan is the final answer, it's not the first answer. So we're excited about the work we do in scholarships, and we're going to continue to invest in that. I'd say from the other end of that spectrum, from a policy perspective, I was chatting with my son this morning, and I said, "Hey, what do you think a stigma of higher education is?" Because that was one of the prompts that I was thinking about chatting with you about this morning. And he said, one, it sounds elitist, he was trying to be provocative, and he said it should be called continuing education, not higher education. And I realized that in that sentence, it encapsulated another thing I've been saying, which is there should be no stigma associated with going to community college. And yes, by definition, that is higher education, but it's really a form of continuing your education. And we see a lot written about, quote, lifetime learners. And I do think we're in a world that is moving rapidly, and education is not going to be one and done anymore. So I think taking away the stigma that going to community college for a couple of years is it's seen as a failure, not a success. And if you could get more folks going and knocking out their core classes at community college, and then they could still go spend 4 years at a state institution or another 4-year institution, but 2 years at community college and 4 years gets you a master's degree and makes you highly proficient in something you should be passionate about. So I do think we're at a unique time where we're talking about free tuition at state institutions in the Biden administration, and we have a chance to actually change the paths and the stigmas that have been associated with some of those vocational paths and some of those on-ramps into a higher education and a mastery of a skill.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great final thought. I mean, yeah, a lot of relevance to our topic of just, yeah, I mean, these, the on-ramps, like you said, are just these different pathways and opportunities, whether it is a boot camp or going to community college and, then going on from there for further education, or maybe that's it. And that can be a really cost-effective option. And you still get, more specialized kind of professional options from there. But yeah, I mean, there's so many stigmas and different things like that in higher education. I think that is an interesting idea of kind of like trying to like rebrand, because I mean, obviously like some institutions have like, oh, this is our like division of continuing education. And like, it's kind of like just this offshoot. But I know like, I think I've been mentioning this a lot more because I'm actually like 4 courses into taking these short courses through University of California, Irvine's division of continuing education, and it's on like esports, and it's stuff I'm really interested in, and it's super cost effective. And I know that like it'll just help me to like distinguish myself, further of just, esports being this really unique thing that's blossoming and whatever. But it's like, I wouldn't have gone to get like, another master's in esports or something if they even existed. So I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's just understanding that there's just so many opportunities and so much potential in this really broad and diverse landscape of higher education, and just allowing for people to be more informed about that, and, the costs associated with those, and, just the different funding options. Like there's just so much. And, I think part of the game is just trying to build that awareness and build, people's understanding and try to work away at those stigmas. So I feel like we're trying to do our part here with this great conversation. And, I thank you so much, Ken, for jumping on and having, this conversation and sharing all that you did. And we'll have ways to connect with everything that you mentioned in the show notes, all the resources, and to connect with, the work that you're doing there at Ascent. But yeah, just thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Dustin, and thanks for making this a topic of conversation. It's I'm always available to talk, and I appreciate you putting this content out into the world so that people can be more informed.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.